get to spend asking your question. I have learned over the years that if you treat people like adults, they act like it. So tonight I'm asking you to be an adult for me, and I'm asking you to be respectful of the fact that there are over 100 people in this room who need to ask questions, and the longer you take to talk about things, the less of those people are going to get to ask their questions. So if you wouldn't mind helping everybody else out, take a few minutes, ask your question, and let the questions, and then let's move on to the next question. I would also point out that as proper decorum would dictate, naturally, please do not interrupt anybody who is talking. Please do not interrupt the panelists as they're speaking. Whenever people are talking, we want to show them the respect of listening to what they have to say, and we want to make sure we show that kind of respect. I am going to be the master of ceremonies tonight. If you have a problem with something going on the stage, I'm the one that will address it. If there's a problem with something going on out in the crowd, I will address it. If somebody's acting a fool, please don't. I choose to believe that the crowd we have here tonight is responsible enough to say, we're not here to act a fool. I would also add to everybody that we are not currently in legislative session down in Baton Rouge. There's not a vote happening tonight. There's not going to be a vote these guys rush off to after this. What's done is done, and what's going to happen can still be affected, but it's not going to be affected tonight. We're going to be making an impression on these guys by what we say and what we ask, and what they're going to be able to do about it won't really be starting until this next legislative session. So let's not get irate, let's not get crazy. If you do get irate, I'm going to give you a warning, and I'm going to ask you to please stop and refrain yourself. If you continue to be irate, I will ask you to leave. If you do not leave, we will ask the Sheriff's Department to escort you out to the parking lot and make sure that you leave. The reason for that is the safety of everybody in this room. Can we all agree on that? Give me an amen? Amen. There's only one question you're not allowed to ask tonight. And that is, how many times I had to say sequestration in the mirror before I figured out how to say it right. That's the only question you cannot ask tonight. Okay about that? Do not ask that.
What does it mean? Tell us what it means.
And don't ask me what it means. Don't ask me what it means. I'm just here to be a coordinator tonight. When you're called upon, state your name, the community you live in, be respectful. Please do not use any profanity. Do not scream and yell. Please ask your question promptly. Hand the microphone back to one of my staff members, one of my team members, and then allow the panel to do so. If you don't mind, I know everybody here may not share my belief in this, but we're going to pray before we get started. Is that okay? Let's stand together and go to the Lord in a word of prayer. Father, we love you, and we are so thankful that we live in a country where we can meet and gather with the people we have elected so we can share with them our thoughts, and we can ask them about why they've done what they've done and how they will represent us in the future. I ask tonight that you would give this crowd the wisdom and the vigilance to ask good questions, questions that will invoke thought, questions that will direct us into a good future. And I pray, Father, for our panelists. I pray for the legislators that represent us. Lord, I ask that you would protect them and guide them and give them wisdom in the days ahead and in the months and years ahead as they make decisions that affect us. And I pray, Father, that tonight's meeting would be a meeting that we could leave here saying, honored and glorified God because of the way that we have conducted our business. We ask all of these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. You may be seated. Thank you so much. Now, for the folks that you really came here to see, we're going to pass these out real quick to a few of you guys, and we're going to start asking some questions. We're going to start with Representative Brett Guyman. Representative Guyman is the chairman of the House Natural Resource and Environment Committee. Can you please take 3 or 4 minutes and discuss what efforts you led in committee this past year that was related to carbon capture and sequestration?
David, thank you, and thank all of you for being here, and thanks to my colleagues for being here, and Dr. Upton and Dustin, thank you all for being here as well. Very important topic, and we're just so glad that you all are here. I have one quick question for David. Why did you get the only stool that has a back on it, and we're here?
Because I'm the only one that doesn't know what sequestration means.
Fair enough. So as chairman of the House Natural Resources Committee, all of these bills, for the most part, come through our committee. I also have here 2 of our colleagues from the House, Representative all through the session. So not only do we get to come to these meetings and talk about it and listen and hear from you, we get to hear you come talk to us and tell us how you feel about particular bills that come through the legislature. So we've had a lot of hours to live on this subject in the past 2 years. Much of it controversial, as you well know. That's why you're here tonight, to learn and to share your thoughts with us. I think we had 22 to 25 pieces of legislation last year. 14 or 15 of them came through our committee. Hours and hours of debate. Most of those bills did not pass. My buddy here, Senator Reese, got one out. A squeaker, but he got it out and got that through. He's going to be talking about that later. But a lot of issues we're trying to address around the subject of carbon capture. A lot of work is done in our community. I would predict it's the #1 issue in the next legislative session, right up there with insurance and things that affect us daily. But I believe this will be the #1 issue again that we'll be dealing with, and I would anticipate this year, David, that we have more bills in our community because it's a longer session and we're not limited in the number of bills that we can file. So for instance, last year we could only file 5. So Chuck Owen could only file 5 bills. This year you can file 55 if he wants to. So if you multiply that times the number of people who have legislation on this subject matter, I anticipate we're going to have a very, very busy session. And before I pass the mic, please come to Baton Rouge. I know it's a long way. I know it's, everybody's got to work or whatever, but we want you to come. We want you to come to the community hearings. We want to hear from you. And we appreciate it when you do come. I know we had a full house last year on a couple of occasions, and we really appreciate hearing from you. Please know that you can come and that you can come to the table and testify and tell us how you feel about those bills.
Thank you very much. Senator Mike Reese of District 30. Senator Reese, you authored legislation that was ultimately signed into law requiring the Department of Energy and Natural Resources to give, quote, substantial local consideration during the permitting process for carbon capture and sequestration projects. Please expand on what this legislation does and how it will balance local concerns with broader energy and economic goals the state may have.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a hard time sitting and talking, so I have to stand up for a minute. First of all, Brother Crew, thank you for putting this event together. Very professional, very well done. It creates a perfect forum for the citizens of South Beauregard Parish to get some information on an important topic. And I also want to say, while I have a moment, about the great work that Chairman Gondon did in this last legislative session. This is an issue that brought a lot of passion. It brought a lot of our constituents to Baton Rouge to express it. I think he did a good job. He had some late nights. He tried to give everybody an opportunity to express their interests, whether they were pro or con, on this topic, and I appreciate the work he did there. Now, the legislation that I passed this last session really came on the heels of some additional legislation that my good friend and colleague, Representative Owen, worked on. And I really held my legislation back pending the outcome of some stuff he was working on, because we went into the session with the #1 goal being that we create a responsibility at the local level to regulate where permits were issued and not issued, and give a voice to local government in doing so. When we weren't successful in passing bills that did that in legislative session, we had to pivot to something different. And so what my bill did is a bill that basically says that you have to give in the permitting process substantial consideration to local government and local public input in the permitting process, the public comment period. This is a process that we took from the coastal permitting process. So prior to my bill passing, you could have a permit that was pending in a public comment period, and you could have citizens that say, we're opposed to this for a variety of reasons. But the agency would really be limited in terms of denying the permit to information that was just purely technical. Did a citizen point to a technical issue that rose to the level that we shouldn't issue this permit? And what this bill does is gives them the opportunity to deny a permit based on the substantial consideration of local government and local input from citizens, and that stand up in court as a reason for the denial of the permit being issued. And so I think it gives great voice to local government, gives great voice to local citizens, and it's consistent with what we do in coastal permitting now, where a number of permits have been denied just based on that sole piece of information. Secondly, we were getting feedback from citizens that said that landmen that were coming to talk to them about leasing their property, whether that was for a pipeline or whether that was for the unit where they would actually have a sequestration well, would sometimes have, at the very first knock on the door, offer something in terms of lease terms, and then immediately say, if you're not interested in this or you don't sign it, we're just going to use eminent domain, we're going to take your land. so what we further did in our bill is put into law what we call the Landman Code of Conduct. And it basically lists about 13 additional steps that landman has to go through in the process of negotiating with you in a lease. And if that ever led to, which it won't lead to that in a unitization, but in terms of a pipeline, led to the process of using eminent domain or something like that, it's about 13 additional steps they have to go through in terms of sharing information with you, the number of times they have to meet with you, the content of their proposal that you have to see, the information they have to provide to you. And so I think it goes a long way to making sure that they're not able to just run over a citizen without giving them all the proper information, their time to do their own due diligence, their time to seek professional assistance in that process as well. And I'm sure one of my other colleagues will talk how that kind of works in companion with another piece of legislation that forces any of that action to occur in your local judicial jurisdiction. And then the last thing that my bill did was dealt with another issue that's outstanding that's going to take additional legislation to accomplish, and that deals with mineral servitudes. And so, in Louisiana, in some cases, the landowner, the surface right owner, is also the mineral owner. But in many cases in Louisiana, the surface owner may not be the mineral owner. Maybe the previous surface owner preserved the mineral rights. Well, we didn't have any process for that mineral right owner who could be impacted by a carbon permit being issued to have a voice in the process. And so my bill also requires a notice that goes to the mineral servitude owner as well as the surface owner, so that they're put on notice that something may be occurring that could impact them, that may spur ultimately litigation on behalf of the servitude owner. And then hopefully in the future we're going to pass additional legislation that will preserve and install some additional rights of that mineral servitude owner in that process. So those are the provisions of the piece of legislation that we ultimately passed in a goal to complement some of the other work that some of my colleagues did.
Thank you very much. I'm going to have a follow-up question on that later. I'll get with you later on that follow-up question during the night. I'll have a question on that. Next up, I'd like to introduce Representatives DeWitt Carrier of District 32 and Representative Chuck Owen of District 30. We're going to start with Representative Carrier, and we're going to ask you both the same question. Gentlemen, you both sponsored bills this past session that would have allowed for local vote on whether carbon sequestration projects could take place in a given parish. Could you both speak to what you heard from the public and what your view is on how local governments should be involved in this process?
Well, first of all, the local option that I had was allow people without the parish to decide their own fate. I believe in local government control. And, of course, it got killed in the committee. Bad. And we fight the industry, fight the government, and now the president. So it went down in flames, actually. But I want to just say one thing. I had all y'all in my district, and Brett got and stole y'all from me.
You ain't taking South Pole, brother.
Thank you very much, Representative Carrier. Representative Owen, the same question. Could you speak to what you heard from the public and what your view is on how local governments should be involved in this process?
Thank you.
Y'all hear me okay? Thank y'all for coming tonight. I'm Chuck Owen. I live up in Leesville. I represent part of Beauregard Parish. I represent Leesville down to DeRidder, to the south side of DeRidder. So Brett's paradigm for having this tonight was any legislator that touched Beauregard Parish. So that's why I'm here. Most important thing I want to say about this legislation is I did it because I believe in local control. We have a thing in this country called federalism at the national level, where the national government arranges how we live, and then they delegate powers down to the states. And there was an agreement upon that at the beginning. We have a similar thing in Louisiana, and it's called subsidiarity. We have a tradition in Louisiana of letting parishes decide their own future. I want you, wherever you live, to decide your own future. And that's what my bill is about. Because from the moment this erupted about a year ago in Vernon Parish, for all of us, when the sheet kind of came off, or when the veneer, we started figuring out where we were with this. People started saying, when do I get to say in this? Why are you doing this to me? My citizens summarily said, we want to make this decision. So I have sponsored two bills. The first one was House Bill 4, and it was an option for any parish in the state that wanted to, whether it's Richland or Tangipahoa or Livingston or Beauregard, where they could say, yes, we want a Class 6 well, or no, we don't. And I coded it as a business activity because this is a business activity. Now, some of y'all most of y'all from here, South Beauregard, it was just 2 years ago that this parish allowed parish-wide liquor sales, right? For years and years, this was a dry parish. Y'all had the authority for years to decide your own future here. And as I dug into the laws, the weird, crazy laws in our state, we allow police juries and parishes all over the state to decide what they have. We decided down to the size of TV antennas, to nuclear waste, to coal waste, to the sizes of ditches. So I figured, okay, the parish ought to be able to decide if they want this business activity. And as a fallback to what my citizens demanded of me, and they're still demanding, that if the citizens don't like what the police jury said, then they could bring a vote of the people. So if the police jury in Vernon or Beauregard or Allen decided they wanted this, or let's say they didn't want it, and the citizens say, you know what, there's a plant coming. Someone wants to put a plant here. You guys are fools. Let's have a vote. And I thought that was the most even sequencing of democracy that I could think of. And I got run over in the street like a cat. I mean, I got beat like a baby seal in committee. But I'm not going to give up. But that was the essence of my first bill. House Bill 4 was where each parish could decide their own future. My fallback plan became, okay, we have a thing called local bill. And DeWitt and I did this, and Troy Romero did this. He had a bill for Allen. I had a standalone bill for Beauregard and a standalone bill for Vernon. Troy Romero had one for Jeff Davis. We all lost in committee. Same thing. We tried to explain that we want our people to decide this, and we were rebuffed. And if you want to know why we were rebuffed, we can talk about that later. But we were told, tough. Someone else will decide that for you. So that was my set of bills, and I fully intend to bring them back.
On other aspects of carbon sequestration, namely eminent domain, bills to authorize liens for victims of CO2 pipeline levy a tax on carbon pipelines. Could you relate to us tonight what risk?
Thank y'all for coming. The issue was property rights, okay, and that affects the eminent domain. Remove the eminent domain on the pipeline, and then I ran a separate bill to remove it for the disposal. So a lot of people don't understand where I'm coming from. If carbon is coming, that lease away and strand their minerals that's below their property, that's up to them. Sign that lease, because one day my grandchildren may reap something. I just don't want to. That you may have wanted to build your home on, don't sign the lease. That's just the way it is, and that's the main reason I was doing the eminent domain. Okay, the other one was taxation. So, say it is coming. Who is providing the extra safety measures to help protect in case there is a problem? I proposed a 5 cents per ton mile of pipeline for disposal. Not for the EOR, which is oil recovery. They were omitted from this. This was just pipelines that were dealing with the disposal of CO2. 5 cents a ton mile. Not a whole lot of money, okay? Not when they're making $85 a ton. We were asking for 5 cents a ton mile. That was going, and it was in the bill to be spent 3 miles on each side of the pipeline. The reason I did the 3 miles is because the fire departments could man 24-hour-a-day safety where they needed to be manned. EV vehicles would be provided. Schools could be protected. Nursing homes could be protected with extra devices in case there is a spill. That's why I ran that bill. That bill also went down in a flame with the other. And then I think my fourth bill was, first lien holder. Say there was a ruptured pipe or a gas leak or it some way or another got out of the ground. I ran a bill to where the victim within a 25-mile radius of that leak would be lien holders against that company. The reason I did that is because that company could file bankruptcy. Well, by the time it gets down there to the end of all their lien holders, there's no money there. So they get to scoop free. So I moved it up there to where they would be the first lien holder. And that bill also went down. But look, I represent Sabine, Vernon, and Beauregard to Dry Creek and down to Quincy on the west side. Mine's like a big horseshoe. But those are the bills that we ran. I'm planning on running the same bills again. It's people that are getting out like this and getting information that will be able to put a little pressure on your senators and your representatives if you're against it to maybe sway them instead of having a 10-2 vote again. Maybe we can have a 7-5 vote for some of these bills. It's very important. Your input is so important to your representatives and senators. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative Shammerhorn. Dr. Upton and Deputy Secretary Davidson, we're going to come to you guys. Make sure to stay brief so we can get into the public Q&A. Dr. Greg Upton is the Executive Director of the LSU Center for Energy Studies. Dr. Upton, we will be addressing many economic concerns throughout the night. But starting off, I'd like to ask you, what is the economic benefit to the state from carbon capture sequestration projects? And do they outweigh the environmental and property concerns of Louisiana residents?
Yeah, thanks David for the question, and Chairman Guyman and Senator Reese, thanks for having me in your district. It's an honor to be here. So as David mentioned, I had the opportunity to lead the Center for Energy Studies at LSU. We were actually created by the legislature back in the early 80s, and really our function is to provide information. So do we have all the answers? Of course not. to balance two things. On one hand, of course, we have to stay economically competitive in terms of the cost. And so if we produce these products that are too expensive for that global market, we're of course not going to be able to sell them on the global market. But on the flip side, increasingly customers around the world are asking these companies to document what their carbon intensity is and show what their carbon intensity is relative to competitors around the world. And so this is really the kind of balance that these companies are trying to achieve. And one of the tools in the tool chest is carbon capture, utilization, and storage. And so that's when you emit carbon dioxide out of some point source. You capture that, you then transport it to a location, either permanently sequester underground, or you're able to utilize that carbon dioxide for some other purpose. One of those purposes is enhanced oil recovery. So that's the first question is, thinking about what is the investment within this broader petrochemical sector. The other more specific thing to your communities of what are the potential benefits? Of course, landowners within the economic activity are going to sign leases. They're going to get lease payments in a very similar way that you're used to oil and gas royalties. There's also the pipelines that pay property tax, as well as the wells themselves that are sequestered that are going to pay those property taxes. And that's the kind of information that if you're interested in, we're happy to help you provide for your specific reason. Does it outweigh the risks? That is a question for you as the community to answer, not us. We did in Pineville a few weeks ago, had a meeting where we brought together a lot of subject matter experts. I brought in a geologist who brought in this model. We brought in a petroleum engineer. We brought in a chemical engineer. And when I asked them, and by the way, we have a webinar that we did right before session with Chairman Guyman and Chairman Hinskins on the Senate side of House Natural Resources. The Secretary of the Department of Energy and Natural Resources was there, as well as the Commissioner of Conservation. And we asked them this question: what is the risk of this? The technical experts and economic economists, they will say from the capture to the transportation to the sequestration, they classify it in kind of low to moderate risk relative to other activities that occur within our industrial sector in Louisiana. And again, I can point you to those specific subject matter experts that will say that. But ultimately, what is the benefit to the risk? Of course, you need to quantify those with those benefits as well as understand those risks more fully. So we're happy to help you do that. So thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for your input, Dr. Upton. Deputy Secretary Dustin Davidson of the Louisiana Department of Energy and Natural Resources. Deputy Secretary Davidson, your department now oversees permitting for Class 6 wells, which are the wells that are required for permanent carbon storage. Please explain what a Class 6 well is, like you're explaining it to a third grader, because I do not know. And what is the permitting process involved in that? And how does the department work to ensure that local concerns are heard?
Yes, sir. Thank you all for being here. So the Class 6 process is a type of well that the Environmental Protection Agency has deemed for carbon capture. They're Class 1 through 3. Class 1 is your typical oil and gas. Class 2 is kind of your enhanced oil recovery, Class 2 is your injection with brine. Class 3, Class 4 is nuclear waste, which is illegal in every part. So if anyone tells you that they can sequester nuclear waste underground, they won't. Class 5 is kind of $2 million, upwards as much as $35 million in financial security to make sure if anything happens to that well, they are liable to cover for it. And it's not going to come on the state's hands, and by the state's hands, I mean the taxpayer. So there's a significant amount of progress that goes through this. It's not something that happens overnight. I mean, we're reviewing some, and it's taken us 2 years. Some have been in the process with EPA for 4 that we've been handed. So this isn't something that necessarily happens overnight, but it's a very extensive and long process that we make sure we cross all of our T's and dot our I's and make sure that we're not going to permit anything that's going to provide harm to the public.
I have 2 follow-up questions. Very short answers required, I promise. How is the public notified when there is a time for public hearings when they come out and make comment in the permit process?
Yeah, so that's actually a big part of what we did in the legislative session, right? We identified that when we first got primacy, we didn't do a good job of notifying the public. Typically, it was in the paper. That wasn't good enough. So what we've done is we put all this information on our website. You can actually go look at the permits themselves or the applications themselves on the website. We're putting that information on the website. We're now taking the initiative to reach out to the legislators and let them know that we're going through this process. But then also we have a listserv to the department where we have interested stakeholders where we send that information out as well. So we're doing press releases. We're also putting it in the paper. We're reaching out to the legislators. We're trying to do everything we can to make sure that everybody's aware. We're also telling these companies to engage with the community because at the beginning of this process, a lot of companies did not do that. They just showed up in your neighborhoods and they had some process that they wanted to do and you really didn't know what was going on. We're telling them to do that on the front end. Let y'all know exactly what they're intending to do in your neighborhoods so that they can understand or you can understand exactly where these projects are in the process. So that's really where we're at.
All right. Second follow-up question. You mentioned that the companies are required to maintain those wells for 50 years. Is the carbon still there after 50 years? And if it is, who maintains it after that? What happens after that?
So after that 50 years, that financial instrument that I talked about, that financial security, depending on how much it is, it goes well by well based on the amount that they're going to sequester. But that money stays with the department. And so when that company satisfies their 50 years, we have that money on hand where we can go in and manage if there's an issue with the well, we can go back in and recap it, or we're hoping that there isn't an issue. But if there's anything that sort of happens after that 50 years, we have the ability as a department with the funds available to go in and take care of that problem.
So after that 50 years, who is responsible for making sure the wells are being checked and all that? Is that the state?
That would be us.
Okay. How often will they check those wells? Is that a monthly, an annual?
So we haven't gotten to that 50 years yet. We haven't permitted a well just yet. But ideally, yes. I mean, we look at it as a similar situation we do with oil and gas wells, where we get out there and we're monitoring our operators as much as possible. We're making sure that they're following the rules and our regulations. It is a process that, again, we're still reviewing. It can be as frequent as the community deems it necessary, right? I don't think there's any one answer to how to do this. I think we're open to any sort of suggestions on what people want to see, but at the end of the day, we're looking at it similar to our oil and gas process. We're going to maintain enforcement mechanisms and have people going out and doing these wells.
So it's important that the public continue to stay on with their state legislators in this process.
Absolutely. Not only state legislators, stay with the department as well. I mean, we frequently get calls about orphan oil wells, and that's something that we continue to monitor to this day. We view this as the same thing. There's no reason why you should be able to call us and tell us that you have an issue with the well and you think you should come out and check that. We want to know that. We have to know that, because if not, then we're not doing our job.
All right. I'm going to ask 2 questions, and then after that, we're going to go to our public question and answer time. Question number 1, this is for everybody. What is the primary goal of carbon capture and sequestration in Louisiana? Is it to reduce emissions, attract new industry, meet federal mandates, or is it something else? Representative Gowdy, can you start with that, please?
It's my understanding, I'm gonna stand up because my back hurts, I don't have a platform, I still want to it's my understanding that originally this was a mechanism to reduce the greenhouse gas for the climate change agenda decades ago. And it has become recently a tax credit driven process where industry is able to get paid to sequester the CO2 in the ground. So it's a combination of both, overall, but it's my opinion
so, I'm gonna ask another question, and you guys are free to answer this one. With all of the industry interests in carbon capture and sequestration, can I call that CCS, by the way?
Yes.
My lord, I'm struggling with
Sorry, I
sequestration.
have an objection. I need to
All
use
right.
sequestration
There you go.
more time.
We'll call it storage now, okay? So, with all the industry interests in CCS, hallelujah, there must be, as you mentioned, a lot of money coming from somewhere. So let's get to the elephant in the room on that. Where is the money coming from? Anybody?
So yeah, I can start with that. So the federal government, starting with George Bush, passed what was called the 45Q tax credit.
Which Bush?
The second Bush. Yeah, George W. Bush. And he passed what was called the 45Q tax credit. And what that was for is for sequestration of carbon dioxide. When you did that, you would get a tax credit. Then the first Trump administration came in, and the Trump administration and the Republicans in Congress increased the value of that tax credit. Then we had the Biden administration come in, and then they further expanded that through the Inflation Reduction Act. And then we just had, again, through the One Big Beautiful Bill Act with the Trump administration and the Republicans in Congress, further expand that 45Q tax credit. We can talk about the nuances of how they do that. But essentially, they get up to $85 a ton for every ton of carbon dioxide that's sequestered underground. You want background on kind of who gets paid? Is that germane here, or just?
Just need to know where the money's coming from. That's all I want to know.
And so that's number one. And then the second thing, of course, is these companies are making these decarbonization commitments. They're trying to reduce the carbon intensity of their products, and they're selling these products into these global markets that again are asking them to document. So those are the two pieces of the tax credit and then those global markets.
All right, thank you very much. We're about to begin some public Q&A. Ms. Melissa, are you ready over on this? Oh, you want to speak? Representative Chairman Horn, go ahead and speak, sir.
To answer your question more directly,
Yes.
who pays for this?
Mhm.
Everybody that pays tax.
Well, no, I just want to say one quick thing about.
Jeff's about to preach, guys.
Say one quick thing about 45Q. This effort has forced me into learning things I never had a reason to learn. I've never heard of 45Q until about a year ago. I started digging into it, no pun intended. Is there any other option inside of 45Q besides burying it? And there is. Federal government provides for putting it in concrete, putting it in fertilizer. There's places you can put it that are not in your feet. Now, I've asked this to some industry people, and they're smart people, and they say, yes, Representative Owen, you're right, but it's not as cost effective for us. What that means is it's cheaper for us to throw the garbage out the window than it is to drive up the street and put it in a dumpster. It'll take some effort to refit concrete plants, to build fertilizer plants. But there are ways to get 45Q tax credit. The question has to become what we as a society want to sign up to. Do we want to sign up to the risk? Do we want to do something else? That's my understanding of what 45Q is.
Thank you very much, Representative Owen, for that. I did not know that. Thank you very much. Ms. Melissa, you know what? Ms. Joy, come on up here. We'll start right here. We're going to have our first question right here. Young man, if you would, tell us your name and where you're from. And there's not a time limit, but please do remember we have a lot of folks going to ask questions.
I will be quick. So,
Thank you, brother.
my name's John West. I'm from Vernon Parish. I'm just a non-retired infantryman is what I am. Was going to leave Dr. Upton out of this. I was going to go straight to us, but they did say something about 45Q. I've met Dr. Upton once down in March with Brett and everybody. So yeah, 45Q is one thing, but are you aware of the carbon safe program underneath the Department of Energy? Yes, no? So you're aware of the $27,845,000 for federal grants for the DOE to these projects? One being the Evergreen Sequestration Hub, which is in this area, and the on-stream one off Holly Beach and the River Parish, all these, right? So where I'm going with that is, right, I do a little bit of work in the environmental world for a living, right? There's this thing called NEPA, right? And the NEPA uses, it used to be one of two things. It used to be commitment of federal dollars or a major federal action. Well, this administration kind of inadvertently, or whatever you want to call it, turned NEPA on its head, and all the code of federal regulations that govern NEPA are no longer valid. Agencies have their own business rules. Where it now says that it has to be major federal action and commitment of federal dollars. they rank them in order. I've done this a long time, so carbon dioxide is up top because it's gonna be 97, 98%, and then it kind of goes down through the others. Well, there's mercury, another thing on this list. So it's not just CO2, folks. It's other stuff, right? What I would advise both the legislative bodies here, and I'll get to y'all in 1 second, look at that final rule by the EPA, because what it is called a conditional exclusion under the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. The state of Louisiana gained primacy from the EPA around 1985 underneath RCRA. They've been managing it through LDEQ, which I have not heard anything on this whole carbon sequestration fund at all. Right? So there's a little bit of disconnect there when we talk about permitting and how the waste is going to be managed. We don't understand how DNR is going to be the authority to manage a RCRA waste according to the EPA. So if you could follow up with that at some point.
Yeah, no, definitely. I did touch on that. So yeah, it's going to be roughly at, I would say the worst 97, but a lot of what we've seen is getting that 99%. They want to be as pure as possible because, don't forget that a lot of the utilization component of carbon waste is used in food products. Your Coca-Colas, your bags of chips, things like that. That has to be as pure as possible. That has to be food grade, right? And so that is what we're talking about here at the department, especially on the pipeline safety side. We want that carbon to be as pure as possible to that 99.9%. And yes, I do understand that at some points it may not be as pure as we would like it, but getting it to that point is what we see as critical, making sure that safety is the number one aspect of this. I mean, you see it, not the same process, but you see it in EOR as well, right? You're not going to be pumping something down there that is not going to be as beneficial to the process, or going to be considered some sort of waste product that you're putting into the process, right? You really can't do that in that situation. So yes, we want it to be as pure as possible. Purity is a very high standard, but we're getting it. Also on the RCRA point, so based on that level of CO2 that we have in there, it's not necessarily an EPA situation because it's not under Clean Air Act that we're reviewing this in terms of the sequestration, right? This is under the EPA's underground injection control process. And so DEQ is going to be managing the major source and minor source emissions part of that as well. But once we get down to that sequestering it, putting it into the pipeline, that's where you make that separation of those other contaminants versus the carbon. So that's what we're focusing on is that carbon. DEQ is going to maintain their major minor source, and we're going to be dealing with the injection from it.
Yeah, not to cut you off, I'm perfectly aware of a major and minor source,
Yeah.
Clean Air Act, Title V, I work with one, right? RCRA is a waste management, not an air pollution program. RCRA is D, which is in municipal solid waste, C, which is hazardous, I is underground storage streams. So it has nothing to do with air emissions.
But those are for class 1 through 3, not for 6.
I'm done.
Yeah, we can talk about it. Yeah.
Last question for the legislators. So, last thing for the legislators here is, I appreciate Senator Reese's bill. I think there's a little bit of subjectivity in substantial consideration, so I think there's going to have to be some oversight of DNR when we look at some substantial consideration. But I'm looking at a letter here, and this is the 2024 Priority Climate Action Plan that was signed by the former administration, governor, I don't know what I'm supposed to say, to tell you the truth. It was signed in 2023, the plan's dated 2024. And I hear all the talk about from the legislative body that says, hey, we want local government. We want them to do this. And even in this letter, it says, this is the first of the deliverables for an EPA climate pollution reduction grant. Once again, federal funded. But it says right here, as we look toward implementation of this plan, we look forward to working closely with local government, state, and federal partners. In this last legislative session, it's real hard to walk away and think that there's any input from the local government being considered in these processes. And that's not even a year old. And here we are. The first thing they do is take away local government's authority to manage RCRA-D permitted stuff in their parish where they already manage RCRA-D permitted stuff. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to take another question real quick. This young lady right here, what did you just say, brother? This young lady, would you Parish, for your question, sweetheart. Let's get a Beauregard resident real quick. We've got a Vernon and a Cameron. Let's get a Beauregard resident right here, please. State your name and where you live, sir.
I'm in Parish. I live on Beauregard Road. Been there for 46 years. And what I want to know is why they want to build one right there by us in our community. I mean, isn't there other places they could build this? Why there? Is it the soil? And how are they gonna, what they gonna do with this stuff? With the CO2? They gonna inject it right there? They gonna transport it out? What's they gonna do? And what,
Do any of our panelists have any information on the project there?
So Ed, that's a great question, and we've met with some of the folks that are doing that project on Gaytown Road. We understand how controversial the construction process is on that. It's my understanding, and they're not here tonight to answer, and so I want to be clear, this is my understanding. There's not going to be any storage on Gaytown Road. They're going to pipe it somewhere else, and I don't know whether it's going to be Vernon, hypothetically, or Allen, hypothetically, or even the Calcasieu, because there are proposed projects at all three of those places. So where they would pipe the CO2 from that separation on Gaytown Road, we don't know. I'm sure they know, but we don't know. But I'm pretty sure there's not going to be any carbon storage on Gaytown Road. You know that?
Yeah, correct. And I can also say,
We've actually talked about this because I was concerned that they were doing one in my district, of course, which is Gaytown Road, and it's my understanding they're going to pipe it somewhere else, which presents another problem. I'm not saying that's not an issue, but storing it is a whole nother level.
I can also say that we have 2 applications for this parish. Those applications are nowhere near even being to the middle point, right? So it'll be a long time before we actually get to the process of actually reviewing it. I would say getting to the point where we're actually serious about issuing a permit. But knowing that there's significant interest in this area, the first person that's going to know is Mr. Godwin and Mr. Reese, right? So they're going to know when we get to that point where we're ready to let the public know that we're going to move forward with this. But that's not going to be for any time in the near future.
So to follow up on that, since you brought it up, how many proposed projects are there for Beauregard Parish?
2.
All right, and so you said it's gonna be a while out. Where are we at on the permit process, if you're allowed to tell us that?
Just technical review. We're going through their permit. We're looking at all their technical information. We're not to a point where we're getting ready to seriously consider them as a project that we're going to move forward with in terms of issuing permits.
So it seems,
Can you tell us where they are?
in the process, or can you tell us where they're located?
Oh, I mean, location, one of them is actually kind of a tri-parish area, if you will, Beauregard. Yeah, top corner, and one is closer to Calcasieu a little bit, but not here to here, specific.
So the next question to follow up on that, how long is this permit process from where we're at today? Like how long before, if everything went perfect for them, how long till their permit would be granted today?
Perfect world, it will be 18 to 24 months.
From now?
From, if they started today, if we could do this as best as we wanted to, it would be 18 to 24 months. Realistically, right now, we're taking a little bit longer because we've identified that it's a lot of information to get through. These applications are roughly 6,000 pages, and we have people going through them hand by hand, reading every line of them. And if there's any sort of, we call them deficiencies in their math, deficiency in their modeling, deficiency in their construction of
issue applications.
No permit. We
No
have, the
permit.
state of Louisiana has not issued a permit to construct a class 5 well yet.
So we have two applications
Class 6
in,
well, yes, thank you.
two applications for Class 6 well in Beauregard Parish at the beginning of the process. If things went as perfect as they could, it would be about 18 months before we saw that permit granted. And there will be public participation allowed for
There
our
has to be.
community to get in.
Yes.
And by law, they're required to take what that public stuff talks about into account, correct?
Yes. And then that is a 30-day, once you get to the draft permit, that is 30 days for public comment with up to 45 days to review. So total about 45 days, but in that process, we're going to be taking that public comment into consideration.
Okay, thank you very much. I haven't hit this side of the room yet. If you'll give me just a second. I want to hit this side of the room. Miss Tina, I see your hand up. Make sure we ask a question so we give our panelists a chance to answer something. I don't want to be the one making them answer, so.
Hello? Oh, okay. Let's see. The Evergreens Equestrian Hub in Quincy, is it true that that's not a well? You're just geologically injecting 250 million tons of CO2? That's what's online everywhere. That it is going to increase to 250 million tons geologically sequestered, not in a well, under the aquifer. Is that true?
Well, it is in a well. So you're drilling a well. You have to drill a well in order to put that carbon into the pressurized zone. And once it gets into that pressurized zone, the pressure at 4,000 feet is going to condense it to a point where, 1 ton roughly looks like that.
So it is in a well? It's
It's
not
like
just
think of
injected?
think of an oil and gas well or a brine well where you inject brine from an oil and gas process. You're injecting the supercritical carbon into the surface. So you have to drill a well in order to do that. An oil and gas well type structure.
Okay, that's not what it's saying online anywhere, but it's just saying it's geologically injected.
That's, I guess, a simplification of the process, yes, but it is injecting it into a geologic structure or a formation of it.
So to clarify, does that mean that the well is a transportation unit to get it to where it's going?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, you're saying there's only 2 projects in Beauregard Parish?
2 that we have applications for, correct?
Okay, but there's going to be 4. Can we find, right?
I mean, there may be multiple wells with a project, but it's going to be 2 projects.
2 carbon dioxide projects?
Yes. Carbon
Okay,
storage projects.
carbon dioxide storage? Because you
Yes,
keep
they-
saying carbon, there's 2 different things.
Well, no,
It's
they
actually 2 different.
carbon dioxide, yes, carbon
Okay,
dioxide.
carbon dioxide. Where exactly are they? In Evergreen?
So the other one is, yes, BK Bird. Yeah, it's kind of that Allen Grove area.
When do we find out exactly where the pipelines are going to go?
That is something that we are going to work through with them on the process. I mean, we haven't, for a lot of these projects, they're still working on the process to get all the transportation infrastructure in place, right? So right now, there's only one real carbon dioxide pipeline throughout the state, and that is the Green Line, right? Others have to build pipelines in order to do that. They're going to partner with companies to see the Williams facility over there. Like Williams is going to be a company that will be doing some of this stuff as well. So they're going to have to build.
Okay, just one more. Will our insurance increase in our community, our insurance for our home insurance? Because of this?
I don't have an answer for you on that, but I can definitely find out and take your information. Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir. Young fellow right here in the middle. He has been waving me down. He looks like he's in a Pentecostal church, guys. He's been waving me down. Get that down. Remember, we were trying to be quick and precise, ask questions, and be done. Thank you, sir.
Jesse Waller, been in Ragley for, I guess this is 15 or 16 years. Sicko for 21 years. I worked in the petrochemical industry. I'm very familiar with all this, what's going on. I'm also very familiar with the wonderful legal terms that they like to use for stuff. We won't get into that. So I purchased a piece of property 15 years ago for my future permanent location. I work in a refinery. I didn't want to live in a refinery. Spend enough time there as it is. Now it's looking like I'm getting a small miniature refinery right across the street from my house. I'm the closest person that's most affected by this on Gate Time Road. So a couple questions. Number one, I like to look at the sky. Is there anything going on with regards to light pollution ordinances? You know, as this facility comes online, they're going to be having lights at nighttime. I don't know how familiar or people like to look at the night sky. I thoroughly enjoy it. That's going to satellites, space station, stars, comets, asteroids, meteorites, all these wonderful things. The aurora. I don't know if everybody got to see the aurora. What was that? A few months back. Amazing. You ain't gonna see that with these
And you
lights.
forgot the UFO.
I'm not gonna see that. So, first off, yeah, so are those ordinances being looked at for number one? Number two, you know, for somebody as such as me, as well as my neighbors, I'm sure feel the exact same way, that this has been this is their homestead, this is their chunk of ground. They worked hard to set up their place, and somebody across the street is proposed to come in and build a plant, which I'm not going to get into it, but everything starts off fresh and bright and shiny and new. But after you get a couple of regime changes, money crunches, things get derelict. We'll just leave it at that. So we know that's the normal way of order of things. We have best intentions. I get that. Most companies do. But the bottom line, it's about money. Your money is paying for this, not their money. Your taxpayer money. You can say the government's paying for it. It's not. It's you. You are the government. Now, we have elected officials that represent the government, but you're coming out of your wallets. Every single one of you. This $85 a ton, potentially getting more, that's taken from you. Anyway, so try not to rant, I'm sorry. Number two, is there any kind of program, because we've seen how the program worked with Sasol down in Mossville, when Sasol expanded and bought all those people out, for somebody such as ourselves that live directly X amount of feet. I'm 30 yards from this facility. Is there any proposed legislation to say, hey, you don't like it that we're coming in here and ruining your neighborhood and building this? We should offer you not what the average market, this is, and I get it, I'm not trying to say my property is better than anybody else's. We are all a community, but everybody's piece of property is special to them. So this, I had no plans on wanting to leave. If this gets built across the street, I no longer want to be a taxpayer citizen. I've been in the community for 15 years on a volunteer fire department. In the community, you can't even imagine how much outreach that I've done and helping. I'm the average American dream success story. Started with nothing. I worked my butt off and came and made my life, and now it's looking like all that was for naught. So is there any legislation to protect somebody such as myself that says, hey, okay, if this does get passed, then we have to offer you a buyout, number one. Not that I want to go anywhere. I love where I'm at. I'm in the middle of a project, and I'm looking forward to finish it, but this is a very hindrance in that. Number two, I just lost my train of thought.
Well, I can get an answer to one question while you're thinking about it. Hold on.
So Jesse, okay, so you live on Gaytown Road.
Yes, sir. I'm on the corner of Police and Gate.
Right, so I have a lot of friends on Gaytown Road, some of them are in this crowd tonight, I won't pick them out, because they don't.
They said like this.
also in the, abatement part of it, I guess you would call it, noise abatement, lighting abatement, whatever that all
Yeah,
needs
and
to be.
Jesse, I think that's all, local ordinances, and we're really focused on carbon capture, as far as,
I got you. And I get that, but
And
the
look,
facility that I was referring to is not the pipeline, it is the facility that they're separating, using amine from, to extract the carbon from the sour.
And I just want to add one quick thing, what Representative Goff said. I do think your police jury hears that. Our most recent battle was to make them aware that people tend to sleep at night.
Exactly.
So,
I
and
used to.
they ought to work on maybe keeping the project quiet at night. And have more of their activity done during the daytime, which initially we had a lot of pushback from them about that.
Yeah,
And I
we
think
make progress
it's
now,
ultimately
for
the push of the police jury saying, look, we will create ordinances that will maintain this, and then working with Williams, trying to convince them that they really need to have a different construction schedule, which they ultimately kind of acquiesce to. But I think in much the same way as anything else gets built on that site, you're gonna have to work with the police jury to make sure there's codes and ordinances in place to make sure it's conducive to meeting what they're doing.
Right, and then so, also, if you get some more here in a little bit, we can always circle back. 1 second, Ms. Karen sent her hand up a minute ago, we're gonna get Ms. Karen real quick. What she got here? Oh, back here.
Okay, so I'm gathering, I used to work for the State Department, so I understand if you were under certain ramifications, certain guidelines, that you can only speak to certain things and you can't just say anything. And what I'm getting is that you're speaking a lot of politically correct speak, because we have had this community disrupted completely by all the pipelines that are being put in that are supposedly, we've been told that they're the carbon pipelines. But this is what I want to know. Why would these companies put that much money into putting these pipelines in if they didn't have plans of putting carbon through these pipelines anyway? Because it's not so much the wells that I'm worried about. I'm worried about a pipeline leak along the way. And that's where, if I've done my research, I found that a lot of the massive death has come from pipelines breaking and leaking and killing people because they can't breathe and they die on the spot. So I was told that there's no legislation now, and it makes it really easy for
we see going on now. The separation and the CO2 storage is something that could happen in the future. I've asked for where that route is gonna go, because I wanna know if that CO2 pipeline is also coming through my property. So understand, you and I are on the same page with that question. And that information is not available yet, but we're trying to get it. We wanna know where is that CO2 pipeline going, and then we're gonna fight to make sure that they can't make you give the use of your land up through eminent domain. We're gonna fight that until my legislative career is over, and I know they feel the same way, because we want you to do it only if you want it. We don't want you to be forced to give up your property for a CO2 pipeline if you don't, because of the risk that could come with it, or you just flat out don't want it. So that's kind of two things going on. The question about the, you reusing the oil pipe, I have asked you all that before, but I would want to you to give an explanation on how that would be converted, but it's my understanding that it's very difficult. So,
Yes, it is very good.
Wait, I wanna make sure you understand, why are they putting all this money into this station?
because it's a 20-year contract with Semper LNG to sell the gas to them, and that's what's going on now. That's what I've been told from the industry people.
Well, also on top of that, you had a number of LNG export facilities being built in Cameron, and that's their way to get gas from Texas, North Louisiana, on down to export. In terms of using old pipelines, yeah, that is a process that is not very easy to do, because one thing, I think it was Jesse who mentioned that things deteriorate over time. You can have that with some old pipelines that haven't been in use, or things that have been used for natural gas or petroleum. But also, that is why we're seeing a lot of companies invest in building new pipelines, because it can be hard for a company to say, we're gonna turn this off and use it just for carbon dioxide, when we haven't even had permit issued for carbon dioxide yet, right? So they're making money off of that gas pipeline. It's a lot easier for them to go ahead and build a new one than it would be for them to reuse old pipelines that they may have to rebuild it.
All right, really quickly,
I just want to address you real quickly, man. The world is craving LNG.
I know that.
Last year, the United States signed a long-term, and the reason these pipes are coming, they're coming to burning Parish. Last year, the United States, Germany signed a long-term agreement with the United States last year to sell LNG, and burying carbon is not in there. They don't care. There are pockets, there are ideological pockets, but I've not seen any trade agreements. They want our LNG. That's what they're doing. And I hate that's coming to you, but I just want to let you know that they want our LNG.
That's fine.
yeah, I get it. Mr. Petrie, really quickly, remember, very quick, ask a question.
Yeah, I wanted to see if Brett would elaborate on eminent domain. Is there ever a point where they're not allowed to eminent domain, intrastate versus interstate? Is there a gathering system?
And you're speaking on carbon capture or just in general?
In general,
Okay.
but maybe specific.
Well, let's talk about the carbon capture pipelines, because I think that's what most of us are worried about. Prior to 2024,
this young lady's been waving her hand at me for quite a while. This young lady right here with the beautiful blonde hair, the long locks.
Okay. My first question is, with all of this carbon sequestration, how much is that going to affect our atmosphere and clean up the climate? Has that been quantified?
Anybody want to take that?
So there are models that I can connect you with that are online. You can go play around with. They look at, okay, what are the different policy levers that one could pull and technology levers, and what would that do to global emissions? Likely, in my opinion, global, and I'm talking greenhouse gas emissions, which carbon dioxide is the largest one, are likely to increase over the next decade. And the reason for that is in the United States, we've actually seen reductions in emissions, but globally we're seeing increases in emissions, especially as the developing world is developing. But if you want a specific, how large could a project be relative to total emissions, certainly I can get that for you. But
Well, I'm wondering, this is a very expensive project, and it is not a current project. This is an ongoing project where they're looking for zero emission carbons. That's what they're looking for. So if carbon dioxide is 0.04% of the atmosphere, and we're doing all of this stuff that is not healthy for our planet, I'm just wondering, I really understood that the reason that they started all of this was because of the polar ice caps melting, the rising sea levels, the really bad weather storms, that was the reason for the sequestration, to alleviate that.
yes, ma'am. So there are models that they estimate what's called the social cost of carbon. What is the cost to future humans from emitting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere? And there are different breakdowns of what these different costs are. But I'm happy, if you want the specific question answered of how large is this relative to the global amount of emissions, that is a specific thing that we can answer, but it is a small share of global emissions.
It doesn't matter about the emissions. What matters is if the emissions are here to curb the declination of our climate, healthy climate, surely for billions of dollars, surely somebody has quantified how much this is going to do that. And I just want to make a statement here. June study published in the Geophysical Research Letter said that the Earth's tilt has deviated 31.5 inches in less than 20 years. It's done that because of punching holes in the Earth for water, mostly, but part of it has to do with mantle convection. And that's where from the Earth's core, the molten rocks come up, then they cool, and then they go down again, which has caused volcanoes and things. So that's things from within the Earth that goes outside the Earth that causes a wobble in the Earth. These minor and regular adjustments relative to the sun affects the amount of solar radiation and insolation that reaches the Earth. And even though the tilt changes by only 1 degree or 2, that's enough to change the angle at which the Earth's energy hits, and that is a major cause of these melting polar ice caps and the rise in the sea level. So that actually would seem to make sense as a reason why we're having these issues. And I'm trying to understand how capturing carbon is going to do something for that.
Since I see you got a notebook and a pen, I'm going to make a recommendation for a book to read. There's a guy named Stephen Koonin, K-O-O-N-I-N. He worked in the Obama administration. At one time in his life, he was a big believer in global climate change and these types of things. He had a revelation, was fired because he spoke of these revelations. He's a PhD, I think he's at New York University. His book is called Unsettled, and it goes into a lot of these questions you're having. Dr. Koonin, this book is well documented. It's tons and tons of sources in it. He estimates in his book that if we start doing this now, and everyone on Earth does it, it'll change the environment in 50 to 100
I'm just a simple old country girl. In a way, that's just like Dorothy when she went to the Emerald City and saw the Wizard of Oz, and they pulled back the curtain, and it was just an ordinary man there. In a way, this seems the same. Because they're wanting somebody that's in the carbon capture game, carbon whatever. That sort of bypassed the whole thing of this being something good for the planet and something that's going to be good for health sustainability.
Thank you very much, Darling. All right, we're going to take a few more public questions. I'm going to ask you, let's come back to this side of the room. This young man over here, he's waved at me a couple times too. We're going to try to get to as many questions as possible, I promise, guys. Let's make sure we get to a question quick so our legislators can start responding. Thank you, brother.
Cody Hanchey, Raggers. I had a couple of questions. Thank y'all to the representatives coming. It seems like all of you guys are kind of on our side to stop some of the CCS. And then you have Trey and Dr. Upton that are more for CCS, what it seems like. Is that true?
No, I'm not for or against it. Our job at the department is just to regulate it to make sure we don't have any negative impact to it. I mean, that's our job on anything, right? When it comes to oil and gas, when it comes to brine, when it comes to anything, our job, we are a safety department. We permit activity based on whether it's right or it's wrong. We're not going to play into any side of it. We just look at the science and make sure it's appropriate.
Yeah, I'm simply here to try to provide information if you want it. That is my only role here. So I'm not promoting any policy or any project.
And I know most of yours have been on economic, but most of your grants have been funded by the oil companies. So it will bias. And can you publish some of yours?
So that's just not true, but I'm happy to touch base with you after.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think y'all did get like a $3 million grant from Shell and a few others. Is that not true? Tell us you're getting that for research.
I'm happy to, all of our center's finances are publicly available. I have sent every project we've ever applied for to actually legislators who have requested. We'll send that to you as well. We get funding, most of our funding over the years has come from the legislature. We were created by the legislature in the early 80s. We do grants and contracts and those kind of things, but the majority of our funding has actually been state.
And Trey, right?
Dustin.
Yeah. So your boss is Tyler, correct? And so he was just recently appointed by Jeff Landry under SB 244. Is that correct?
He was appointed by the governor back in 2023 after inauguration.
Okay. So with SB 244, y'all are the sole ones that get to choose if a permit passes, correct?
Well, we were the ones who got primacy from the EPA, so that was always going to be our job.
And are you able to tell us what Tyler, what he believes in CCS?
It's the same thing that I just said. You know, it comes down to making sure we're permitting a safe process. This is something, the activity is not the same as EOR, not the same as traditional oil and gas. Carbon pipelines are not the same as oil and gas pipelines. But our department's sole job is to make sure that we are enforcing regulations. I will say over time, over the past 50 years, the state has had a bit of a problem with enforcing the regulations that we have on the book. That is something that both Secretary Gray and I have come in and identified as our biggest problem. So right now, moving forward with our reorganization, we're creating our own enforcement arm within the agency to make sure that we're holding bad actors accountable. Because bad actors are the ones that really cause the problem for everyone else. It's not necessarily the good companies that come in and spend money in the communities, the ones that pay for school buses, pay for community centers, things like that. It's the companies that come in and generally don't care, right? We want to go after those companies and make sure they're following the regulations that these gentlemen put on books and these ladies.
Any other questions?
A few more. Just
All right. Here we go. You got it.
So yeah, Trey.
Dustin.
Dustin, sorry.
Dustin, yes.
So if they're not able to pass in this legislation, we just really hope that y'all will help us stop this and not allow these terms. Y'all are our last defense for us, really.
Absolutely. We
talking about state representative.
Yeah,
No, I'm
he's
talking about State Representative Mike Johnson
Yes.
from Pineville, who's the Speaker Pro Tem in the Louisiana legislature, not Congressman Mike Johnson.
Yeah, and I was talking about Senator U.S., not Senator Reese.
Awesome, thank you. Thank you very much. Real quick, I've got two buildings I need to hit real quick. Dr. Parks, if you'll come see Dr. Parks. Don't you make me throw you out of here, Dr. Parks. I love you, Dr. Parks. If you would please ask your question, please.
Thank you. Yes, I want to ask, first of all, about the modeling and permitting regarding the kill zone. Is a kill zone required or in the permitting process? And, or is the public allowed to see it?
No, not a kill zone, but what we do have is a pressure front versus a plume, which creates your area of review, your AOR. So we're looking at the underground modeling in terms of geology first, right? So we're not necessarily looking at outside. If that makes sense, right? We're specifically focusing on the underground portion.
Yes, sir. Dr. Last name again?
Ken is fine. I live off of
1973, so they've been around for a little while. With the carbon capture, haven't heard anything about open air capture. When I was in the Navy riding submarines, we used to capture carbon all the time with monolith lighting. Didn't require being put in the ground or anything like that. So am I understanding that on daytime there's not going to be a well, there's just going to be piping? Is that what we're saying?
Is that what we're saying?
That is what we've been told by the people that are doing the project. That is correct.
Okay. So, seals fail. People in Oklahoma that have these type of things also experience tremors on the ground and all kind of things. And also, Williams, it seems to me the pipeline they just put in is made of carbon steel. Would that not be susceptible to carbonic corrosion? Being a boiler inspector and knowing the difference of soot in a boiler and what water does to it, I would say they would eat that carbon steel up pretty good. It may take a little time. We don't know about undetected faults. We can do faults, but we also have a thing called undetected faults that we don't know they're there. That's why they're undetected. Plus, with all the drilling and stuff that's gone on over the years, it can get into those, it can seep out, go right to that pipeline, and spill the carbon steel, and we've got a whole other issue that goes on there. Not include the asphyxiation. And for what we're talking about, with China and India and the number of coal-fired plants that they're building every day and all this, it seems to me, and this is just my opinion, that the companies have figured out a way to make $85 per ton over X amount of miles, and then in 20 years, that's going to be a pretty nice penny, and they can walk away and leave $35 million. And does that $35 million go into the general fund, or does it go right into stay with DNR?
So I can tell you, you mentioned the other wells in the faults, right?
Yes.
That is something that through the test well process, that's where we're having these companies identify. Get that geology, that subsurface geology, bring it to our engineers and our geologists, and we certify if that is enough or not, right? And if we deem that that area is not good enough for carbon sequestration, then we say no. If there are orphan wells in that area that could be potential leak paths, we tell these companies you have to go and replug all of those wells to a carbon standard using that carbon 23. If they don't want to do that, then they can't get the permit.
Okay, so if they plug it, but what about the casing that's already in the ground that's made of carbon steel?
Pull it out, replug it.
So they're going to have to pull every pipe casing out.
If they want to do it in that area where there is artificial penetration, they have to re-enter all those wells and plug them back to a CO2 system.
And who is monitoring that? Or is it left up to the company to say, yep, we did it? Because what I understand from, and trust me, I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, no, okay.
What I'm trying to understand, it says, to me, what I've heard this evening, I know we have somebody responsible for the economist, but we also have somebody that I've heard a lot of, you check your paperwork to make sure the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, to make sure that they've done all the things that we want them to do. But who knows if they're actually doing those things?
We
Who
have
goes back and checks them to make sure, it's one of those trust but verify things.
Yeah, we have inspectors at the department that will go out and make sure that these wells are brought to the CO2 system. We have people at the department that you can sit out and actually put eyes and feet on the ground.
Okay, so
Sorry?
is the open air capture not because also with these processes of them doing this for this part, we're talking about decreased efficiencies at the plants, correct? And then we're also talking about a huge water consumption increase that will occur with these type of operations. So, and then how much more are we going to be generating? So what I kind of hear, and this is my opinion, but kind of what I'm hearing this evening is, we want to tell Europe that we're close to net neutral, and all these people in here are paying all this money so we can give it to the big companies that want to participate and do this on our dime. Because they're getting paid to do this by the federal government. We're paying the federal government. They're making the money, and we're living with the pipelines and the wells. And so we should have some say. We should have
give you a chance. You ready? All right, they're coming for you. All right. Would you tell us your name and where you live?
Charlie Atherton. I live in Suffolk, Louisiana, and I'm impressed with the education process because the people in this room are good at canvas that educate state legislators and the governor to the facts.
So our people are doing a good job, right?
Yeah, the people are doing a good job.
He's saying give yourself a hand, is what he's saying.
We're educating, the elected officials. I wanted to commend the young lady across the room that pointed out that this country's gonna go bankrupt and it's not gonna make any measurable difference in the atmosphere. Remember the dam closing with the bombs on it. It's not gonna make any difference. We're just gonna be bankrupt with wasteland and destroying our country. Until China and India and Russia step up, we're stupid to even keep having this.
Tell us what you really think.
Yeah.
Tell us what you really think.
Yeah. Well, and I wanted to just if you wonder just how big a control that big government has on dictating to the state, what the state's going to do for ExxonMobil and people like that. The gentleman over here in the blue shirt that talked, and they need to go by that Baytown Road and Troy Ball's place and see what can happen with them. And I'd like to follow up on the young lady here from Cameron, because what the young lady from Cameron was talking about was really my question to these guys is why doesn't why the state legislatures not following and the LDNR is not following the EPA Title 14 section 421 that protects sole source drinking water. And that's the elephant in the room that everybody in here is absolutely terrified about, because the risk assessments that I've seen that's been available clearly demonstrate it's not a matter of if groundwater or sole source aquifers are being contaminated, it's just a matter of when.
So is that the question? Are we in violation of these?
Yeah, I want to know why, Brett, how come your committee that doesn't use that to kill this? Because it's a sole source drinking water, the state's not following it. If you look at the NARS, whatever, it indicates that you're not supposed to do anything that contaminates the stratum. So, I mean, how come the legislature's not holding LDNR or DEQ accountable for telling you guys, hey, y'all can't do this, just like you guys on ExxonMobil is telling Allen Pass police jury that they can't pass any ordinances, and what you laid out and said everything could be a parish ordinance. Hell no, Mobil told them we're gonna sue you individually, and you need to drop it. So they have no control. So my second question to you guys is, when the police juries were originally formed, the initial power they were given and the reason they were formed was public health and safety. So when in the hell did they lose that power? How did the legislature erode the police juries to where they had basically no power at all? I don't understand this.
Right. Representative Gamma, that's what you.
So, on the EPA rule that you cited, that is under the Safe Water Drinking Act.
Yeah, and that's what this is all about.
Right. And the state
Because
of
you said those wells go through the drinking water into the aquifer, and your risk assessments, the EPA risk assessments say it's not a matter of if, it's when the groundwater is going to get contaminated.
So the state of Louisiana was given primacy based on our ability to protect the underground drinking
more important to us than anything ExxonMobil is gonna tell us. So we wanna hear from you, and we represent you, and we're going to do what you all ask us to do.
Well, we
And
would like some ExxonMobil to explain to your committee why they threatened, threatening with his job.
Okay, we'll,
Roland Hollins threatened his job. You guys ought to find out why in the hell they can do that. Talk to the chair. I mean, they're playing hardball. Yeah. And we're trying to learn how to do it. But I really do appreciate you guys taking the time to come and give us an opportunity to bitch and whine, you know how we are. I mean, we're unreasonable people, you know, I mean, we want safe drinking water and safe atmosphere. You explain how the regulations that they followed in Mississippi didn't do a thing to protect health and safety. There's nothing in any of the Title VI regulations that actually protect public health and safety. All that monitoring that you're talking about, it needs to be additional monitoring, and it ought to be on the local police jury's website. So we're monitoring, because the company that wrote the regulations was following the regulations in Mississippi, and look what happened. So all those temperature changes and stuff, that needs to show up in the police jury's OEP, so they can monitor it, because the idiots running the pipeline, they're not gonna throw their job away. They're gonna try to cover it up and kill people. So your monitoring needs to be real-time, full-time, public, on the public website.
We got to let somebody else find out. Thank you so much for asking your questions and giving us your time this night. Thank you.
Thank you for your patience.
And we appreciate you being here tonight.
I appreciate you tolerating me.
Hey, no one has to tolerate you. All right, here's the thing. We are going to take some more questions, but we are down to about 20 minutes left. We want to be very respectful of everybody's time. I know old folks have bedtimes, so I'm going to ask of all of our people who need to ask questions, please don't make any statements. We're going to bring you the microphone, ask the question. We're going to limit our guys to about 2 minutes on answering, and we're going to go to the next person. Don't give us any statements, just ask the question and let them answer it. We're going to start over here. We're coming over to you guys, okay? All right. Brother Ron.
And I'm Ron from Gay Town Road. Makes that thing. But my question is to Mr. Reese and the guy next to you.
Dustin.
Okay, y'all two. On these wells, they're putting like whatever, 200 something tons, 285,000 tons a year in the ground. How far out does the wells go? How much are y'all permitting? Are y'all permitting 600 feet out?
It's a well by well. I know that's not the answer you're looking for, but it's based on well by well. It's based on the.
How much can they put in? My question.
So that really depends on the pore space that they're operating. Some pore spaces they fan out wide, some stack up higher. So it really is a case by case basis. I can't give you a specific answer. I can get with you and give you if you're interested in a specific project, if that's helpful. But it's not cookie cutter one looks like the other.
Well, the other one falls the next question back to Mr. Reese, because he's in the mineral department. So if it goes out so far, it's all good. And then they're supposed to notify the neighbors about what's going to be in their mineral rights. In other words, the other ones that y'all looking at on the other side of the world, how big are y'all doing those? My question.
Yeah, so, and again, I serve in the Senate, so I'll give full disclosure that I'm not an expert on the science of that, the geology of that. But what we did in terms of minerals was, if you're a surface owner and you're impacted in the capture space where a well will be going, you'll have to be notified, you'll have to be contacted by the company, and at least will have to be negotiated with you
considered it, it's not something that we want to happen, right? But they do happen, right? It does happen. But the department is happy to provide that equipment to everyone who wishes to have it to ensure that there is no carbon dioxide leakage into the water. Absolutely.
Oh,
The company will, we can require the company to do it. We can tell the company to put monitoring equipment in nearby wells to make sure that their equipment is not, or their well is not leaking.
but to clarify, is that required by law now to provide that?
It's not required by law, but we can ensure through the permit process that they are monitoring the drinking water area of the unit.
Okay, so,
Yeah, definitely, and be notified, 100%, yes.
one second, we gotta make sure we got a microphone before we ask the question. 1 second, Miss Melissa, will you, get, Bob? Remember, we're sticking to questions only right now, so we can get as many answers as possible.
Yeah, I got two questions.
What you got?
You can't smell it, you can't see it, so when the pipeline busts, how do we know? When the neighbor falls over dead, you gotta try to find an oxygen bottle?
So that's,
How are we gonna know that pipeline didn't rupture?
so question number 1, how do we know if the pipeline is ruptured?
So from my understanding, it is visible, it looks like a cloud, it's below, the oxygen level, so you will see it on the ground, unlike other substances that can leak. So it is visible, but yes, it is dangerous. We've seen it with Starship.
I thought you couldn't see carbon monoxide.
When it's in a supercritical phase,
The next question is,
it's supercritical, yes.
you got your carbon well somewhere, and they come to my place and decide, we're gonna drill an oil well. You give them a permit to drill that oil well. You don't know if that fault is over there, and they drill that well 20,000 feet and hit that carbon gas, and it comes out with the gas and oil and everything else. So what do you do with that?
We will know that, because we're gonna be the ones that are permitting that carbon capture well and that pore space. So we're gonna know that that's there. We're gonna know the dangers of permitting an oil and gas well through a carbon.
I understand your science. I worked in the oil field. Both of my sons was in oil. And my oldest son was working in Texas. They had permits to drill wells. They started drilling, and guess what happened? All the way around them, sinkholes started appearing. They had to fill that and go. So I know science says, oh yeah, well this cavity is as big as this room. We're gonna drill here, and we're gonna put the well here. But you don't know if there's a little cavity running off of it. You have no idea until something happens. And when that happens, where you at?
So I think the question is there any way to test and see
Yes.
if there is something intermingling down there?
We do seismic testing, we do magnetometer testing, looking for any orphan wells in the area. We do an extensive amount of testing to make sure that they have the best picture of that subsurface as possible. Then we ask them to drill a test well to ensure that there is going to be enough cap rock and ability to sequester that carbon.
If carbon is found here in the test well thing, I'm
They've
sorry.
been exploring the Carlsbad caverns for 100 years, and they still haven't found all of the holes in that.
Well, we cannot sequester in the salt dome here, right? So that is,
That's what I'm saying.
you can't do it here in Louisiana.
You can't guarantee that what your seismic shows that it doesn't go further. You're just going by what that seismic says.
Well, we're also going about the pressure front and the plume model. So the pressure front is based on the amount that you're injecting, how much that's going to expand out, and that determines your area of the amount. And that can increase throughout the time of the project.
Is it not true that the Tuscaloosa trend runs right through this area? So, where does that go? How far does the Tuscaloosa trend run?
Yeah,
Don't you get me to preaching now, Bob. Don't you get me to preaching. All right, we're down where we have time for 2 more people to ask 1 question apiece. I've got 2 hands up right here. We're going to go with them. Go up here and ask them when we're done, Phil. Here's the thing. When we're concluded, these guys are not running off, sneaking out of the back door. There's no trap door. If you'd like to come visit with them for a few minutes, don't keep them here till midnight. But get them up in a corner somewhere, and don't let them leave and talk to them about some of this stuff. All right, question. I've time for 1 question from this young lady and 1 from this young lady.
Okay, mine's for Dusty. And Dusty, I want to tell you like my mama used to tell me, if I ever ask you a question, I know the answer before I ask you. If you don't believe me, ask these 3 gentlemen sitting down there on the end. My question has to do with the primacy that Louisiana was given by the EPA. And the reason of the primacy was to speed up the process of the permits, correct? Okay. In Senate Bill 244, there is the fast track program that these oil and gas companies can pay extra money to even speed up the process even faster, okay? So my question is a couple of fold. Why have the fast track program? Why do you want to make it faster than what it is? And in Senate Bill 244, there's actually that the department can hire expediters. Their only role is to make this permit go even faster for these oil companies. How fast will it speed it up? Why are we doing it? How much are they paying? And where's the money going?
So I'm glad you asked that. So that
That's 4 questions. We got it. What you got, brother?
expedited permitting already existed for this process. It was already in place before SB 244. We did not have it for coastal permitting. We did not have it for regular oil and gas permitting. We did not have it for other parts of the department. So what you had was folks being able to make overtime and have companies pay for them to work on these permits for a very long time, where folks in the coastal department did not have that opportunity. So what we did was we gave that department wide so that everybody could work on permits, whether it's coastal, whether it's oil and gas, whether it's class 6, class 2, class 3. We gave it to the rest of the department because we felt that it was an opportunity to give people an opportunity to make a little bit more money through this process. But also through the expedited permitting, we also included our ability to deny expedited permitting to an applicant. So previously we did not have the ability to deny the expedited permit. So if a company came to us and said, we want expedited permitting, and they paid for it, we had to do it. And then everybody paid for expedited permitting, and then nobody got expedited permit. Does that make sense? So what we're saying now is if a company comes to us with a project and we don't believe that it justifies expedited permitting, we can tell them no. And we can turn companies away from expedited permitting and only do the ones that we feel meet the justification for doing that, i.e. it's safe, i.e. they don't have a lot of artificial penetration, or if it's a coastal use permit, that is something that has been done for a very long time and we understand that it's not going to have a significant impact. It wasn't so much done for class 6, it was done to give the rest of the department the opportunity to make the same opportunity in terms of getting a little bit more of their paycheck for working on permits over time when they were already doing that, and also give the department the opportunity to turn people away because we did not have the ability to continue working on expedited permitting for everybody today.
So this is not class 6 wells.
For the whole department, and it also gives us the ability to say, no, you don't get expedited permitting.
What would it take the 18 to 24 months it would speed it up to what?
I wish I had an answer for you on that. We haven't gone through that process yet. Like I said, when everybody pays for that expedited permitting, nobody gets expedited permitting because we're working through them all in the same process. But we're hoping to be able to figure that out here pretty soon. And I think that, again, like I said, we're not going to do expedited permitting for something that's extremely complicated and technical and has a ton of wells associated. It's for those projects that we know are on the safer side and give us the ability to work through that quicker so that we can spend more time on those harder ones and make sure that they're appropriate.
All right, well, our last question. Whenever our last question's ended, we're going to give our 5 legislators, just a 1-minute option to tell you goodbye, they love you, and have good sweet dreams tonight. Last question, what you got, Dawn?
I'm Midwest Vernon Parish. why is the safety redacted? Have you updated the seismic data in the permits? I had this discussion with Patrick Corregas. There's seismic data in those permits from 72, 73, 74, 75. Not acceptable. And for all of you, this is not your fault, but I have got to get it off my chest. It's an absolute disgrace to have in charge of the DNR, the person that was running Lamoga, that lobbied for this crap, come to our parishes, and now be in charge of issuing their permits. Absolute disgrace. Should be completely unethical. No.
So on the redacted information, that was one of our top priorities when we came in, because we wanted to make sure that we got the information out there. It made no sense. And you're right, on some of the information, it is proprietary, and it does need to be protected, but a lot of that can be issued to the public. So we're working on it. Yeah, and we're trying to get that information out as soon as we possibly can. On the updated seismic, we hear you on that as well. We're making sure that companies are providing that to us, and again, through that transparency process, we're going to make sure that we provide that on our website. Because of some of the bills that we've had passed, and it's again 244, we're working to ensure that we're putting as much of the information on the website as possible, because that was not done, as you just said. And that's why we're dealing with these issues today. People don't know what's going on, and we have to correct it. So
There's wells you don't know about.
I
They're
know.
on Fort Polk. They're on federal property.
I know.
What are you going to do about it?
That's what the magnetometer survey is supposed to do. Yes, you're absolutely right. There are wells that we don't know about. There are wells in the coastal zone that were previously on land that have now become open water. We don't know that they're there until somebody fixes it. It's a problem. It's a big problem. We're trying to solve it. We're doing our best. We're trying to solve it. But we're going to get that information out on the website as quickly as possible.
Thank you very much, Mr. Davidson. At this time, we're going to let our legislators give us a 60-second closing of what they've got going on, and then we're going to be getting out of here.
I want to thank you all for coming, caring enough about your community to come sit through this and ask these good questions. I want to thank our colleagues that drove over here from the North Shore and around Baton Rouge to come pay attention, because they will be involved in this next time. They got their own situations in their own parishes, but they drove 3 hours to come over here and listen to this. Last thing out of my mouth, I want y'all to please understand this. As a legislator for Vernon and Beauregard, I want the citizens of Beauregard to decide their future. And I want the citizens of Vernon or Livingston or Tangipahoa, whatever, to decide their future. The state needs to give this back to the locals.
60 seconds, Representative Sherman.
Also, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for attending. Hopefully you receive some information that will benefit you in making your decisions, and to hopefully contact some of your other representatives in the police jury and all these other government officials. But thank y'all for coming. If I can ever be of assistance, please feel free to call. Thank you.
Representative Gowin.
David, thank you for putting this on. It was a great place to do it, and the cookies and coffee and water made it even better, so thank you for your help on doing that. Thank all of you for coming tonight. I want to be clear that my number one issue in the next session and the session after is to make sure that no one can take your property from you without you allowing it. No one should be able to take your property from you. We're going to continue to fight that as long as I'm there. Thank all of you for coming. If you have questions, most of you in here, I think, already have my cell phone number. You can come up and visit with me and contact me anytime on any of these issues, and I will work with you on it. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. Senator Reese.
Yeah, look, I certainly appreciate all of you being here and the feedback that you brought to us tonight, and the people that represent the state agency responsible that has the responsibility for permitting. I do wish I could have brought a van of my colleagues from parts of the state of Louisiana that don't yet have this activity in their backyard. Because I think that largely you're talking to a group of legislators that feel the same way you feel and are as cautious about this as you are. We need more of our colleagues to understand why we bring the bills that we bring, why the public feels the way they feel. So I really kind of wish I could have brought a van load of our colleagues that really see kind of what the public sentiment is when there's actually a project being contemplated in your area. And lastly, I'll say this, so you know my core conviction on this issue and the way that I evaluate bills that come before the legislature on this issue is that no citizen in our state should be forced to participate in this process if you do not want to. And I think it is incumbent upon the companies that are seeking permits to explain the science to you, to explain the safety to you, and to seek your approval for it, and that no citizen should be forced to participate, whether it's a pipeline, whether it's a pore space. And that's my goal and kind of the way I approach this topic with any piece of legislation.
Representative Carrier, 60 seconds, brother, what you got?
Thank y'all for coming and thank you guys for doing what y'all do. I just want to say, I don't think people realize how hard the last 2 months of the session was. These guys right here and me sure don't like to get our butts kicked, and that's what happened. And some of our friends, it's hard to fight the industry and the governor and now Trump. So, having said that, we still going to work to try to help as much as we can next session.
Thank you very much. We do have one guest, multiple guests that came. We're going to give a few seconds to Ms. Kim. That's 60 seconds. She's here to support our community tonight. What you got, darling?
So, thank you. Thank you for the invite. I just wanted to say how wonderful these guys are to work with. They really put forth the effort, and I love working under Chairman Gunn. He's got some great leadership. But I just want to say, so I'm from Janesville Parish, where it's going to Lake Marpole, and I've been in this fight for 3 years, trying to protect our lake. And bringing forth and trying to vote, and I voted for every one of those bills. In the 500 next to the schools, there was a bill for it to be a mile, and it got squashed to 500 feet. So just know that we've been trying to protect our kids and our families and our property, and don't give up. Just keep fighting. But I also, one thing that I've experienced through this is just be respectful and not try to cause a lot of tension and stuff, because that just makes it worse when we get to Baton Rouge. So your voices matter. So thank you.
Thank you. Once again, thank you to all of our South Beauregard residents. Thank you to all the guests that came out tonight. We appreciate your participation. These guys will hang around a few more minutes if you'd like to visit. You are dismissed.